Do you remember your sex education? Was it helpful to you? Was it filled with scientific information rather than real, practical advice? I'm Diggory Waite, and this is The Real Sex Education. Every other week, I'll be joined by a guest. We'll impart our own sex wisdom, ask our own sex questions, and we'll go over all the things they don't teach you in school. But in order to do this, I need an expert. A sexpert, if you will. But the only sex and relationship therapist I know is my mum. Hello, Mum.
Hello, Diggs.
In this episode, we speak to comedian and actor Jack Barry about his sex education.
For men, it's like, you guys are going to have the best time. And then for women, it's a bit like that opening scene in Saving Private Ryan.
The importance of communication in an open relationship.
I feel like you've got to say everything and maybe too much sometimes. My partner does think I've got a bit of a big mouth.
And giving his parents marriage counselling.
Oh, why would we pay a therapist to do something? You know us better. So why don't you just tell us what we need to do to fix our relationship?
Hello and welcome to The Real Sex Education. I'm Diggory Waite, and as ever, I'm joined by accredited sex and relationship therapist Cate Campbell. Hello, Mum.
Hello, Diggs.
We're very glad to be joined by actor, comedian, and crisp packet extraordinaire Jack Barry. Jack, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, we're so excited to have you on. Because we've been more recently doing we've had a lot of experts on. Not saying you're not a sex expert. I'm
yes,
sure
and today's no different. Is what you're exactly. About to say.
but we've had a few comedians and people on in the past, and we'd start by asking what their sex education was like. But now we've transitioned a bit away from that. But today we're so excited to get back to that. So
Great.
I think my first question for you is just to get straight into it. How was your sex education?
Yeah, pretty limited, I suppose. I did a show about it actually a few years ago, because I always felt very underprepared. I mean, I'm sure it was like a lot of people. It was about 2 weeks, I think, 2 weeks of science class. And it was very scientific, very mechanical. It was like this, very heterosexual as well. It's like this bit goes in here, and then the man comes, and the woman doesn't need to come. That's fine. That's like a luxury. And then, they shake hands and you say, job well done. And then hopefully there's a baby, unless you're a heathen. And that was sort of it. It was so confusing. I didn't really understand what masturbation was after my sex education. Because, I think it was year 7 when I had it. So I was about 11. And all they told us about masturbation, they were like, it's when the man strokes his penis. And that was how they described it. And I actually hadn't started masturbating at that point. But they were like, every man does it. And it's when you... And I would stroke my penis sometimes, sure. When I was, sometimes when you're just watching TV, you're just you keep an eye on it like a cat. It's like a house cat sitting on your
it sounds like you'd go, here, kitty, 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 as you're stroking away.
Just making sure that it was okay. So I was like, that must be it then. They were like, they told me it's everybody does it. And so I thought that's what masturbation was for a couple of years, until I sort of actually, and I was like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. I just thought that was it. It was so badly explained to me. I just didn't really understand.
Also the classic thing of masturbation is for guys. Guys, listen up. It's your bit. It's the masturbation bit.
Yeah. Women, all the girls, put your fingers in your ears and go la, 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 la until this bit's over, because you don't need to hear this.
This bit's rank. It's horrible. It's just dirty boys that do this bit. Put your fingers in your ears.
It really is for men, it's like sex education is you guys are going to have the best time. And then for women, it's a bit like that opening scene in Saving Private Ryan. It's there's going to be a lot of blood and danger, and your friend's going to lose an arm, and you're going to be lucky if you survive. And then, men, it's da, da, da. It's like a festival. Everybody's having a great time. And it was, years afterwards that I just always assumed that when I was having sex with a girl, she would be having a great time. And it was only years later that I realised that actually the first few times I had sex, I don't think the woman was having any fun at all.
But it might have been. She might have been having a good laugh.
She might have been. Maybe she still tells the story.
It might have been humorous. That's always a possibility. It is surprising how often I see couples and sort of say to them, and do you usually climax and during intercourse? And the man goes, oh yes, she always does, and the woman goes, no, not usually, and they're horrified. And that happens a lot. A lot.
And they haven't sort of discussed it up until that point.
Well, no, assumptions are made, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like you just. I think that's just what sex education was really. It was just like, well, when the man finishes, it's
That's
time
the end of it.
It's time to call it a day. Good game.
Time for a snooze.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and in terms of like any sort of mutual joy or even just like the mechanics of how to bring joy to each other. There was no education in that whatsoever.
No.
I mean, there should be two, I feel, maybe. There's like you kind of need that mechanical, like, this is how babies are made. You should wear a condom maybe when you're about 11 because you're too young to really get it then. And then maybe when you're like 15, you have it again where it's like, and this is how you make sure everyone's having a nice time. And
Definitely, and these are the different relationship styles, and these are the different sexualities.
Yes,
and
and less hetero.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And a lot more about people who don't like sex, and sexualities as well. That's always left out, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. And how different things can turn you on, like non-sexual things. And you can actually get like a close, intimate relationship with someone without touching them sometimes. I think
absolutely. I'm still traumatized by the question we had about hair. Someone who was turned on by hair.
Yeah.
They had a hair fetish, and their girlfriend got their hair cut, and they were mortified, and they were like, "Can I ask her to wear a wig?"
No,
like,
they weren't into it anymore.
Yeah. How bad is it? Because it was like a fetish. Like, I think the difference, am I right, Mum, is like the difference between a kink and a fetish is a kink is like something you like, and it's fun every now and then. A fetish is like, I need this.
Yes.
I need this to get me turned on. And it was their fetish. It was like long hair was like their thing. So when their girlfriend cut their hair, they were like, I don't know what to do now.
This is done. This has done it for me. I felt the same way when my girlfriend cut her feet off. That was a hard moment for me.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, can I get her to wear shoes anyway on the end? Stuff them with something?
Yeah.
But that's such a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, you get those novelty Halloween like severed feet. You just stick those on, and you're like, this is fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I could get something with this. No, I don't really have a foot fetish. I think I don't know what fetishes I have.
Diggory used to have a false arm, didn't you?
What?
That you got for Christmas.
Oh, right, yeah. We're talking about a severed false arm, which I did actually. I was constantly going up to people and I'd put up my sleeve and then I'd like shake their hand and then obviously my arm would come off.
That's really
that
good.
All the time.
And would you do that during sex as well?
Yeah. Well, obviously shaking hands at the end, be like, well done, everyone, thank you.
Yeah.
It would come up like,
it was my fake arm the entire time.
The whole time. Yeah. The whole 30 seconds, yeah. So what about, so how has your relationship with sex and relationships grown from then? Because obviously I'm sure you know a lot more now. Again, in that stand-up show, you sort of say that you are, what is it, an amateur sexer? You do like your sex.
Yeah. I'm not a professional, but I'm a keen amateur, I'd say. Yeah. I think I try to be sex positive, and I think in the last few years I've sort of opened up a bit sexually. I think you sort of my first relationships, my first sort of proper serious relationship was when I learned about female pleasure and how to actually make sure that she's having a good time. But it was still quite a traditional relationship in terms of like monogamy and jealousy and those sorts of traits. And my current partner, we've been together for quite a few years now. We sort of opened up our relationship a few years ago after some conversations about sex positivity and just like being together forever and how to navigate spending the rest of our lives together. And it just sort of, it sort of slowly snowballed into this like more open relationship that we've got now. I mean, to go into details, my partner's bisexual and she grew up in quite a traditional, quite conservative area in South America. She's from Argentina. and there just weren't really any lesbians in her town. So she moved over to here when we first started going out with each other. And it was about 3 years into our relationship that she was like, oh, I've never really had any sexual experiences with women, even though I'm bisexual. And I was like, well, that's awful. You must try it.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
I can personally recommend.
I can recommend you must try having sex with women. It really is wonderful. And and so I sort of said to her at the time, like, I think you should go and you should have some sexual experiences with women. And
you meant that genuinely. You weren't, and there was no jealousy from your side. Or anything. You were just like, there, do it, go for it.
Yeah, no, there wasn't. And I've said this to sort of friends of mine before, like lesbian friends of mine who have been a bit like, I think that's a bit problematic. It's this traditional idea that, like, I think men are like, oh, I don't feel so threatened if my partner has sex with a woman than I do. And I can see why it's a bit offensive, because it sort of suggests that homosexual relationships are less meaningful than heterosexual relationships.
Yeah.
But I think from my point of view, I just felt like it was just different hardware. It's just like, I cannot provide sex with a woman because I do not have the necessary components. If my partner goes and has sex with another man, there's like a little part of me that feels just like, well, I've got penis. So if you're having sex with other penis, what's wrong with my penis? But if you want to have sex with vagina, that's not on my menu. I can recommend it, like a maitre d' in a restaurant. The vagina is excellent this evening. I must recommend. But I can't provide that. So we sort of, we discussed that for a while. And then she sort of said, oh, I think I'd prefer it if you were there. So we had threesomes a few times with a friend, and then it just sort of spiraled from there. There was like one time where I was away and my partner and the friend who we'd had our threesomes with, they were together. And there was a moment where it was like, oh, can we have sex? Oh, Jack and I haven't discussed it yet. So then we had a conversation about it afterwards. It was like, how would you feel if we had sex and I wasn't there? And I was like, I'd be okay with it. So then we sort of started doing it that way. And then it just kind of moved from there. And we were like, well, how about we just sort of open this up? And it just sort of came by increments, just like by steps. And I wouldn't say there was like no jealousy. It's like, because it is like a thing that's kind of drilled into us, isn't it? That, like, we have to feel jealousy, and we should. And if you care and if you really love someone, then you have to like grab onto them and not share them with anybody. And I feel like it's also like drilled into us that, like, if you do ever have sex with somebody else, something in your relationship is going to be broken. And I think each time one of us had sex with somebody else when we weren't there, there was like a little bit of a fear or nervousness on my part anyway, that it would be different between us and that we would have lost something, and it would be. But then we realised that actually it wasn't. It was exactly the same. And if anything, we felt kind of closer, because it felt like we appreciated our relationship even more. And it's sort of, I don't know. I don't always know the way to articulate it. But I feel like, with a lot of monogamous relationships, people go, right, we're in a relationship now. And then you're done. Once you're married, it's like, well, then you're locked in. And it stops you from putting much effort into making sure that the relationship still works for you both. Whereas if you're polyamorous and you're seeing other people, then you can like borrow things and you learn from other people and you bring that back to your main relationship, and it helps you to strengthen it. I think that's what I found anyway. I feel like it's brought us a lot closer together.
And I mean, did you feel weird opening up? Did you feel weird going off and meeting other people yourself? I mean, how did that happen? Was that an odd kind of transition?
A little bit, yeah. And I think I'm still figuring out that bit of it for sure. Like the idea of like going on dating apps and stuff like that. And I find dating apps quite hard, and especially when you're like finding people on a dating app and in your profile, you've got, I'm married, by the way, but it's cool. And I'm looking for something like that. And it's a very small like pool of people, I think, who are okay with that and are looking for something similar. And so I'm still sort of navigating the best way to meet people who are looking for that kind of arrangement. And for the most part, it's like people that I know already or like friends. we're still sort of navigating it, I'd say. We're still trying to figure it out.
So how much do you talk about it when you've had a date? Do you discuss it? Do you know when you're going on dates, or do you just keep that to yourselves?
No, we pretty much discuss everything. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm big into sort of communication. I know, like, some other people I've met with open relationships, and they're like, it's a don't ask, don't tell policy in our relationship.
Yeah, classic. Yeah.
You know, we'll go on dates with other people, but I don't want to know about it. But I'm big into communication. I feel like you gotta say everything, and maybe too much sometimes. My partner does think I've got a bit of a big mouth and a tendency to overshare. But I think it's, if you've got everything on the table, then there's no surprises, you know, and that's I think how you feel safest in a relationship usually is you know where you're at. I mean, I think because that's the main problem with like cheating in a relationship, isn't it? I think it's people act like there's some kind of like magical spell, and as soon as you touch genitals with another person, then that is what crumbles the relationship. But it's not really, it's the lying, isn't it? And it's the deceit.
Yeah.
So I'd try and just say literally everything that's going on, and then there can be no surprises.
Yeah, it sounds as though you've really made an effort to sort of future-proof the relationship, and yeah. Well,
that was sort of where it came from. It was like I sort of was my parents' relationship counsellor for a bit. They were going through a bit of a tough time, and they wanted to. They were sort of thinking about splitting up, and I kept on saying to them, you need to talk to a professional. You need to go and talk to, but I don't know if this is ageist to say, but I feel like their generation is a bit more suspicious of therapy or counselling. And they couldn't see the benefit of it. They were like, well, why would we pay a therapist to do something? You know us better. So why don't you just tell us what we need to do to fix our relationship? And I was like,
all those years of training.
Yeah, right. I know. I think you kind of need like a degree or something. Well, I'm not qualified for this, but it just became quite clear that like I could kind of see some of the mistakes they had made that had led to them being in this situation now. And so my partner and I sort of started discussing, like, what can we do now to make sure that we don't end up in a situation down the line where we're not really communicating properly and we don't. And so that was when we sort of started communicating everything. And then it was like, oh, right. And also, I think opening up the relationship and having relationships with other people and not having all the pressure on our relationship might release some of the tension as well. And that was sort of, that was part of the reason that we ended up in this situation that we're in now.
And so with other partners, is it shorter term stuff, or would you call other partners girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever? But there would always be this bedrock relationship as well?
I think that's what we're aiming for, is that we might have like something more regular and like but up until now it hasn't. You got to. I mean, it's hard enough to find one person who wants to go out with you. You know, to find one person who wants to go out with you while you're married to somebody else is like even harder. So we're both still in the search for like the right person. I think the dream really would be like a person who finds us both attractive, and maybe we could have a 3. But I think it's really hard to find like that right person. So I think. At the moment, it's just like we're meeting people.
I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like at Christmas when you're deciding whose parents to go and visit. When there's 3 of you, it's hard enough with 2.
Yeah. Well, that's true. This is what the main thing that I find with polyamory. I've have you read that book, The Ethical Slut?
Yeah,
I read that.
Mum loves it.
Yeah,
I do.
I read that. I thought you would have done. I read that when we were first sort of talking about this. And my main thought reading it was like, God, it sounds like a lot of admin.
Yes,
exactly.
One of my main questions here is admin and like diary management. Like it's so much
time management. And that is something that I found. Someone I found on a dating app last summer, and we went on a couple of dates. And then it kind of ended up fizzling out just because I genuinely didn't have time to meet up with each other. I was trying to write this new Edinburgh show, so I was working most evenings. And so being a comedian is really the worst job for this as well, because there's no time for date nights because you're always gigging in the evening. So there's a lot of different things to try and navigate. One of my best friends, who was the person that we first started having the threesomes with, they've always just been like an on again, off again sexual partner, but also one of my best friends. And, that is a relationship that really works, I find, at the moment. It's like, we all love each other as friends, and when it's convenient, as sexual partners as well. And something like that is perfect, So like, finding more people like that to have like a bit of a network of people who have their own partners, but then also are open, and you can just all be friends and like have this kind of wider friendship, sexual family would be the dream, really. That's what I think would be ideal to build. It's funny. This is going to sound really cheesy, but it genuinely is like when we first started discussing it, and me and Martina, it was like we felt so solid in our relationship, and it felt like there's so much love here. We genuinely feel like we've got some to share. And I think it's like the cliche of polyamory, and I always see people talking about it. They're like, polyamory is a thing that people do when their relationship isn't working, and they feel like if they open it up and have sex with other people, then that might fix their broken relationship. And I think that's how most people see all polyamory. And it's like, I think that does happen, and that obviously doesn't work because you're trying to fix something that can't be fixed, and then it does end up like breaking down later on. But if you're coming from it from a point of view of like, God, we feel so secure in this relationship and we're so happy and we just like to include more people in that, then I think that's like...
Yeah, I think more people as well who, as they get older, are challenging traditional relationship patterns. And, because if you've already had your family and that sort of thing, why do you need to go down the traditional route of moving in together and then, and getting married and being monogamous and all of that sort of thing, and having the same groups of friends and sherry parties or whatever it is you do. And they don't want that. They want their own. They want to keep their own homes. And to be freer. And to indulge their interests. And more people are very, very satisfied with lots of relationships.
I think it's like, we have always traditionally had just a very binary way of thinking, I think, haven't we? It's like either you're single or you're coupled, and, you're a man or you're a woman. And it's like, now we're we're realizing that there's millions of different ways to be a human. And so the relationships between different people, also there are a million different ways that you can do it. And even within this, it's like, I find... sometimes you read stuff and it's like, well, either you're monogamous or you're polyamorous. And then even the idea of polyamory, there's like a set idea of what it should be. And actually it's like, oh no, you can just figure it out for yourselves, like within your relationship, and just find what works for you in your specific setup.
And there doesn't have to be a label. I mean, one of my, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, do you say I'm polyamorous? Do you say we're non-monogamous? Do you say we're in an open relationship? Is there a label that you put to it? You're just like, I'm just fucking...
I sort of split, I sort of split between those, really. Yeah. Because I feel like polyamorous suggests that you do have this network of other people or other partners and regular partners, but I'm not quite in that situation yet. So I do just sort of say non-monogamous.
Aspiring polyamorous,
exactly. I'm building the network. I'm out on LinkedIn trying to get my polyamory network. But it's funny, the jealousy thing. My therapist is always like, my therapist was like, you're very insecure. I'm very insecure about so many aspects of my life, like my job, how I'm considered in my job, or like, how successful I'm doing, or all of these sorts of things. But I'm not insecure about the relationship at all for some reason. I think maybe that just speaks to the connection I have with my partner. The idea of her going off and having sex with someone else doesn't make me jealous. I'm just like, oh.
Well, no, because she comes back. And so in so many ways, polyamory is reassuring because you are still together. You're able to go off and do these things and still you want to be together. And people don't think of that bit.
No, people just assume that if you go off and have sex with someone else, then they're going to decide that they like that person more and then they're going to go off with them. Because monogamy doesn't stop that from happening, you know?
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's not like your eyes are then suddenly shut off to absolutely everyone else.
No. People go off and they find other people all the time. And in a way, I sort of find monogamy almost like forces your hand sometimes. You know, like if someone's having an affair with the secretary and then everyone finds out, so then they've got to go off with the secretary, but then they realise that actually maybe they prefer. But, you know, because they've broken this monogamous bond, like then you have to go all in with the new relationship, with the affair. Whereas if you were able to go and have that affair and then come back to the relationship, then you'd realise that was the one that you really care about in the first place.
It's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, we had someone from Japan on. She's called Dr. Alice Patra, and she talked about how in Japan at the moment, people, like, sex is really on the decrease. Like, no one, a lot of people are in relationships and they don't have any sex in their relationships, but they will sleep with people outside the relationship. So when they do have sex, they'll have they'll have these affairs going on, and it's almost like this unspoken thing going on. But it's sort of like, to them, they are in love with their partner and they would never dare leave them, because for them their relationship, or their, in many cases, marriage, represents so much more now, especially the longer it's gone on. It's like this, my best friend, my roommate, all that sort of stuff, but we don't have sex. But it's not really about that. The marriage represents something different, which is kind of where my question comes in now as well, so the future for you and your partner, I mean, is something like marriage on the table? Is something like potentially kids on the table? What would that mean for this sort of way of going about things? Yeah,
that's a good question. Because also they talk about that in The Ethical Slut as well. They sort of say, you know, like it's the traditional idea of a relationship. It puts a lot of pressure on one person. You know, you're expecting to find this person who's going to be your best friend, you know, a responsible financial partner, someone who can raise your kids perfectly. It's like it's a lot for one person to do. And actually, sort of the idea of having different people to do different roles in your life, it does make a lot of sense.
It's the way it always was, though. I mean, it's relatively recent that we've had this silly idea of the one. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that people can't have a monogamous relationship and be really, really happy, because loads do. Yeah. But you can't expect one person to fulfill every single need and to be really upset when they don't. Yeah. And it's expectations of how people think they ought to be that cause breakdown of a lot of relationships. Yeah, exactly. It's unnecessary.
It's the rom-com, it's the Prince Charming kind of mentality that we get drip fed, and we're like, this one person's going to do everything that I need them to do. And I mean, in terms of like having kids and getting married, I don't know. We got married last year for visa reasons. It wasn't a very romantic wedding, just because of Brexit. We needed to get the paperwork done. Brexit. And so I don't know. I'd quite like to have a party at some point. I don't want like a big traditional. Now I just feel like I'm being a bit contrary, though. It's like, well, I'm not monogamous, so now I'm not going to have a proper wedding. I'm not even going to do it.
I'm going to have a massive sex party.
Yeah, exactly. We're just going to have like a shroom buffet, and I just want everyone in a warehouse.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
It would be quite fun. That is what Martina said many times. That's what she's quite keen to do. And in terms of having kids, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of having kids in this kind of a relationship, because that's the other traditional idea, isn't it? It's like, you know, you have the nuclear family and you have two parents, but then there's also that phrase of like, it takes a village, you know, and it's like...
Exactly. You know. And do you know something? It's really changed over the years. So like 15 years ago, I used to see people coming out to their kids and their partners, maybe, of whatever it was that they were into. And it would be a terrible shock for the kids, and they'd go into therapy and it would all be awful. Now, people come for therapy to discuss how to do it, and they all come along together and they come out in the room and everything, and the kids go, yeah, we know. Well done, Dad. This is great. You two will be so much happier polyamorous. What a great idea. Well done, you. I mean, it's completely changed.
That's so cool, though. I love that. Yeah. It's When I do think it's just like the idea of sort of raising people with a group, you know, if you had like these aunts and uncles who were your other partners or, you know, sexual relationships, and they could come in and like help raise a kid. Yeah, it takes like a whole group of people to help raise kids, doesn't it? So I think, I don't think we're ready to have kids anytime soon, but if we did in the future, I'd love the idea that we had this network of other partners who we could all raise the kids together. You can learn so much from lots of different adults teaching you.
That sounds like a great idea. But what would happen if one of your satellite partners wanted to have a kid with you?
Yeah.
Then that would be an interesting thought.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. I have thought about that before, and we have sort of discussed that, because Martina's not sure she wants to actually carry a child. We've sort of spoken about, the possibility of like adopting a child. And then I sort of said, well, what if I had another girlfriend and she wanted to have a baby with me? And Martina was like, I'd love that. Martina loves looking after kids.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's brilliant.
She loves looking after kids, but she's not so wild about the idea of carrying one in her body for 9 months. So I think actually she would probably quite like that. But again, who's this person? It's like, it'd be a dream to find this perfect person, but I think it's going to take a lot of searching to
but it does happen a lot with sort of gay couples, doesn't it? Sometimes they've got whoever the mother or the father is sometimes involved. They share the baby, and then maybe they split up, and then there are more partners, and so it becomes quite a wide group.
Exactly.
Looking after and bringing up this child, which is great.
I've got a friend in the States who's her and her wife, they had a baby with like a sperm donor who was just like a guy that they met when they were on holiday, and they all took
like you do,
and they all just literally just took MDMA one night, and then he did the deed into like a turkey baster or a syringe or something like that, and they just put it into her wife, and then they had a baby. And he still lives in Mexico, but they go down and visit him, and they have a really good relationship with all of his family, and they've got this amazing sort of like extended family. And now he's got his own kid with his wife, who's like a half brother to their child, and they go down and they all hang out, and they have this like amazing sort of extended, very alternative family. I think it's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah, and I love that.
That is cool.
Yeah, and so I think there's so many different ways that you could go about it now.
I mean, we've spoken about finding partners is difficult, but your communication seems to be sound. Like, is there anything else that's hard about it?
The hardest thing is always feeling like you're doing something wrong. And it's kind of what my show's about this year in Edinburgh. It's like I'm just trying to like do things that make me happy, and sort of figure out like what works for me. And at any stage that you try and do something a little bit different, there is always people sort of like telling you that you're doing it a bit wrong, or like making you feel a bit bad about it. And that it's something that you have to try and like get over,
That's a huge shame. I mean, who is it that's judging you? Do you feel, or is it that you feel judged?
Yeah, it's just like friends, even family, like I had people, sort of be like, why are you jeopardizing your relationship by being non-monogamous? It's so irresponsible. You've got a great relationship, and now you're putting it at risk. And I was like, well, I actually think it's made us happier and it's made us closer together. But like, people can't really get their head around it, and they're like, well, if you're going off and fucking other people, then you're going to fall in love with someone else, and then your marriage is going to fall apart. And it's like, you do really get people saying stuff like that to you,
because that could happen anyway, couldn't it? If it was going to happen,
it could happen anyway.
It's more likely to happen if you're frustrated and not fulfilled and all of that, and
pretending you don't find other people attractive or anything. My sister said to me, she was like, if I was with a partner and they were having sex with other people, I'd always wonder why I'm not enough. And I sort of said, but you don't think that about any other relationships that you have. Like we consider that a toxic relationship if, every single time you said, I'm going to go see my family, or I'm going to go see my friends, and then your partner went, why aren't I enough for you? I should be enough for you, and that's, so I kind of feel like it's like a sliding scale of toxicity, isn't it? And there's like, there's things that most of us would consider to be toxic behavior, but then it sort of gets to a point, and then that's sort of considered normal, It's like the idea, obviously, when you're in a relationship with somebody else, a monogamous relationship, you have friends and you have other relationships with other people, and you go off and you have, and if they were trying to stop you from having those relationships with other people, that would be abuse. but then it just stops at sex. And it's like, but why? You know, that's just like an arbitrary line that we've drawn in the sand as a society and gone, that's where it's okay.
Well, actually, funnily enough, it applies as well, not just to sex, but to things which people do, which they consider loving things, things that express their love. So sex is one of them. And of course, things like cooking for somebody or DIY. If you get someone else in to put up shelves when your partner has said they're going to do it, that partner who says they're going to do it and never has done it could get very angry that he was the next door neighbour. That he was brought his tool round, you know, and then the same. I'm sorry, I just couldn't resist. But the same. I mean, I remember once a massive row broke out because while this woman was in hospital, her partner had gone round to someone else's house for a shepherd's pie, and she said, "What is wrong? I will never cook you a shepherd's pie again. Now you've eaten somebody at the neighbour's shepherd's pie." This is not a client, by the way, so no, I'm not.
Confidentiality, right?
I'm not breaking confidentiality, but it made me laugh so much.
Yes.
I mean, it just was so ridiculous. It's a shepherd's pie. It's a betrayal. Betrayed by a shepherd's pie.
Yeah. And it's so funny. Like, I've seen, like, so, you know, I mean, I spend all my time on social media, but, you know, there's like sort of guys on the internet who are like, you know, hey, if your girlfriend goes out to the club and she lets another guy buy her a drink, then that's cheating. And, you know, things like that can be like crossing a line for some people. And I would consider that obscene jealousy and like toxic jealousy.
But it's really interesting you say that, because sometimes couples do come, you know, in the olden days when people, well, maybe some people still do, but people used to go to their religious leaders and they'd teach them how to be married. And they'd have classes and things. Well, sometimes people do go to therapy when they get back together after a breakup or before they get married or something, and they talk about what the pitfalls might be. And one of the main things to say is, what do you consider infidelity? What is it? And it's so amazing what people come out with, and they're so surprised by what each other say. And then when they stop and consider it, quite often they go, nah, actually, that's all right. But, you know, it's in their heads that, you know, if you text another woman. You've crossed a betrayal. You've crossed a line.
Exactly.
It's really interesting.
I really would not care if my partner had sex with someone else, but if she carried on watching a Netflix show that we've been watching together with someone else, I'd be furious,
mate.
That would be too much.
The ultimate.
It was funny. I was so excited for this interview. I was talking about with someone in this house earlier, and I was being like, "Oh, what sort of things like should we talk about?" And they were like, "You know what? It's not about the sex. If I came in and my partner was watching Netflix with someone else, and like they got to a new episode, I'd be fucking furious." And I was like, "That is so true. That is spot on."
I'd be so much more upset. That would cheapen our relationship much more than just having sex with somebody else.
Exactly. I know we're running out of time, so I want to ask you more about firstly about that show. I have another question for you afterwards, but so about the show, talk to us. Where is it? Where can we find it?
Please.
What else is it about?
So my show's it's called Jack Barry. It's called Don't Happy Be Worry. And it's on at the Monkey Barrel in Edinburgh for the entire Fringe. It's on at 10:40 p.m. It's a late night show, so it's quite sexy. So it's a good late night show.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's about this. It's about sort of monogamy and getting married and starting therapy in the lockdown and trying to like work through my issues, but at the same time just trying to navigate life and trying to find my own way of being happy and maybe going against the grain and deciding to be non-monogamous. And those are the themes, I suppose.
Interesting. Oh, interesting. Well, I can't wait to go and see it. It's going to be great. Last question then. For people, because I'm sure the way that we've talked about this today, I feel like I'm sat here and I'm like, well, this sounds amazing. And I think most of that I think is down to what you said. You maybe your therapist may say you're insecure about other things, but you sound so secure in this, and honestly, it's infectious and it's amazing. What advice would you have to people if they were like, this sounds like me? What would be your biggest piece of advice?
I mean, my biggest piece of advice, I think, would be just communicate and just say everything that you feel. And I'm sure you've spoken about this in the podcast as well. Like, we've all been grown up to be a bit repressed and to feel like sex is a bit of a dirty thing. And it feels a bit uncouth to really talk about it and to sort of, tell your partner what you want. But actually, communicating is the best thing. And if you want a certain sexual thing or if you want a certain thing from the relationship, you're not going to get it if you don't tell them. If you tell them and they want something completely different, then maybe this relationship isn't going to work, or you can find a way to compromise and find something that works for both of you. But if you don't communicate everything that you're thinking or everything that you want, then you're not going to be able to find that. So yeah, I would just say communication is the main thing, and just not being worried about jealousy, realizing that we have had it drummed into us that we should be jealous, and it is a thing that you might still feel a little bit of, but it is possible to unlearn it and to work through those feelings of jealousy that we've been told are natural, which I don't think they really are.
Agreed. Jack, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure
Thank you.
and see your show, which is the name again. I don't want to get it wrong because it's a great name.
I'll be there every day. Jack Barry, Don't Happy, Be Worry. At the Monkey Barrel at 10:40 p.m.
Yeah, lovely. Excellent. Jack, thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thanks
Fabulous.
for having me.
You've been listening to The Real Sex Education, which is hosted by Diggory Waite and Cate Campbell. The show is produced by Diggory Waite, and the executive producer is Claire Broughton. The Real Sex Education is a hat-trick podcast.
This podcast is based on the real-life relationship between Diggory Waite and his mother, accredited sex therapist Cate Campbell. The show is therefore inspired by, but otherwise unrelated to, the TV show Sex Education. But yes, Diggory does wish his mother was played by Gillian Anderson.